and backgrounds who've been around for a long time, who are legendary, they often have that argument of they have two great albums, which is better, whether Michael Jackson, what's better, Off the Wall or Thriller, the Beatles, what's better, Revolver or Abbey Road, Stevie Wonder, Songs of Key of Life versus Inhibitions, and so on and so forth. So you guys already sort of touched on it with the Tribe Called Quest, so I want to get, this is for each panelist, and I want to know which, each of you, what's the better record or more influential record to you, whether it's from a historical perspective or a personal perspective, in reference to the Low End Theory versus Midnight Marauders.
It's like a setup question, right?
I'm sorry, I'm Roy, and I was saying I'm the king of setup questions. I love having arguments.
Like honestly, like, and I'm not like copping out. It depends on the day. Some days it's legendary, some days it's not. Today is Low End Theory.
All right.
Generally more of a Midnight Marauders guy. I love Low End Theory. I love, you know, the music on it, but just because that's where I started, you know, like, the first impression, you always remember your first, and so that was like the first, and just having those 8 songs was like, man, I gotta work, because the CD was cracked, so, you know, I had to like save up to afford to buy a good copy, so, because I heard Low End after Midnight Marauders, but just because I could only get half of the record initially, it made me hungry, and the second half didn't disappoint at all, so Midnight Marauders, personally.
I'm trying not to choose, but I actually agree with Alvin over here. It depends on the day, but I will say this: like the last maybe month or so, I wrote a lot of music for the show tomorrow, and I got to know Tribe with a whole other respect and a whole other level. And, definitely Midnight Marauders. I arranged most of that, of the songs of that record, so I say that today.
It's interesting because the way my playlist broke down, all the songs are together, and I actually listened to it all. So I actually literally just like the entire body of work. You know, in this iTunes playlist era we're in, albums as one object have kind of gone away from me. So as I listen to it all, and I'm really delighted with the whole body of work, everything.
What he said. I mean, part of it, because people always forget about People's Instinctive. I can never remember the whole title, but you know, but people forget about that, you know. And so, for me, in terms of playlists, it's all 3. You know, I take them as a body of work, and
by all 3, you mean the first 3 albums?
The first 3 albums, sure. Yeah. Beats, Rhymes, and Life, and The Love Movement were my favorites. But I mean, and also I can assign moments, or like I can tell you about sort of sensory things that happen with certain songs at certain times, and so those albums all kind of come together. But also, I mean, I was in
that's very powerful too. You know, the way music connects to memory.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's because, you know, I mean, I was in high school. I mean, I was in 10th grade, so you went from 10th grade to 11th grade, you know, at the prom or the parties or whatever. So I could just, everything was sort of assigned to certain songs. You know what I mean? So that's why it's all just an experience.
Swirl.
Yes.
For me, definitely Midnight Marauders, and I can't justify that. That's just how I feel. But I do want to second what you said, which is at the time, if people remember, you were supposed to say Low End Theory. I don't know why, but at that time, everybody was, you know, obviously Low End Theory is the better record. At that time, I didn't understand it, and I don't understand it now. They're both great records, and they're both great records as records too, which I think is something important that you don't see in hip-hop so much anymore. You could listen to it from beginning to end. There was a consistent vibe to it. If you were in the mood to listen to the first song, you knew you were going to be in the mood to listen to the second and third, fourth, fifth. They worked as complete albums, which is something I think that was really important in terms of Tribe Called Quest specifically, but also in terms of hip-hop in general. And one more thing, as a researcher, what's really interesting about these questions is not the answer to the questions, but the rationale that people give for them, because it tells you how people think about music. I assume that was all you asked.
Yes. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
For the record, Low End Theory.
No,
Now, I would give it a time check. We have about 10 minutes left for this incredible event. So we just want you, again, to please make sure your questions are very much to the point. Keep your comments extremely short. And please go ahead.
Try to keep it concise. How you doing? My name is Sam, MC in Brookside, New York, New Jersey. In studying my own culture to further extend my culture, I've realized that hip-hop is very self-referential. Be it from like samples, somebody sampling something, or records that they grew up off of, which their audience is going to relate to, or just quoting another MC. It's kind of like a self-bibliography thing going on, where in making this case, I'm going to quote back to Big Daddy Kane to support my case, and KRS-One also said the same thing. Now, I understand that musicians have always done this, and like, you know, playing riffs or notes to the songs that we grew up off of, but it seems to be a little heavier in the case of hip-hop, and I know you guys have examined it or looked at it this way, so just have any of you noticed this, or why do you think that might be the case for hip-hop? It seems to be really, really self-referential.
I think one of the reasons why hip-hop does this so much is because hip-hop kind of had a chance to see how it went. You know, you look at rock and roll, and you look at rapping with jazz, like people used to party and dance to jazz. Like, you know, you think jazz nowadays, once they put the tables and the chairs there, it's over. You know, if you have the option to sit down, a lot of people are going to try and exercise that option. And then, you know, when it's not a dance or a party, I mean, enough respect to all different forms of the music, because, you know, even in the 70s when Freddie Hubbard did stuff like Windjammer, and you have Grover Washington doing Hydra, like it had a funky kind of thing to it. I mean, it just, you know, whatever it could do. Even Herbie Hancock, he was on a sampler. So jazz, you know, it was always self-referencing itself and kind of updating and keeping a check and balance of itself as well. But the thing that happened was, I really feel, is the fact that, you know, when you have a chance to say something, you have a chance to cement it. And when you look at what happened with rock and roll, and you look at what happened with jazz, and you look at, you know, it's kind of hard, you know, and this isn't a diss or anything, but, you know, it's like it gets pioneered by African Americans, and then it gets completely non-African American at some point. And if you keep on inserting, like Jay-Z said, overcharging niggas for what they did to the Cold Crush. Like, some kid's gonna be like, Cold Crush? What's that? And that's like, hey, look over there. Just like Joe was saying, it's like, you know, they looked in this pile of jazz records and found all the missing pieces of a hip-hop record put together. A kid can look inside of this hip-hop record that already has these pieces that are put together from this other record, with vocal pieces on top of that just lead them to another part of the bibliography. So it's like you're getting a whole world of, like, you're getting a library in one song. And I think that, you know, not only does it sound cool and it's just natural, because, you know, hey, I'm listening to Eazy-E. All right, you know, some. You know, it's just a natural, you know, Easy, that's what we want to see. You know, and it's just like, oh, well, that's even Bootsy. So it's just a natural kind of situation that just kind of carries it along, carries the totem pole a little bit better.
I think also, before we go to the next question, I think also there's the issue of signifying, that this is this idea of threading culture through culture is a big part of how black people create, you know, and I think also with hip hop, I think also you're talking about people in general. Again, when we're talking about black people in America, you're talking about people. I mean, I can remember when you'd have like a park jam, and you would open the mic up to whoever wanted to get up there, and the line would be like 9 guys, like all waiting, all with the t-shirts that had the name of their crew in the iron-on fuzzy letters, all waiting to get on the mic. And what it was, I mean, I realized very early that, especially at that time, that the average black male, probably in their lifetime, would never do what I'm doing right now. Hear their voice amplified. They're not likely to give orders to anybody or tell anybody what to do. So this thing to be heard, and you know, now that I got my chance to speak, I'm going to tell everybody everything. You know, I think that this is like, as well as the need to be covert. To like, if you're in the field, you're going to sing, you know, a Bible verse, but you're not talking about actually going to Egypt. You're not getting the hell out of here. That's really what that's about. So I think with that, with technology, with, you know, maybe the speed of things increasing, I think a lot of these pressures kind of form. If if you will, this kind of characteristic, this reference, this sampling, this gumbo approach.
Can I add? I know it's really short, but I just want to touch on the idea that, you know, I mean, basically our culture was disappeared, right?
Yes.
Like we were disappeared as human beings. We were disappeared as people who had a legacy. So, you know, I can't say that when people will shout somebody out, but I do feel like there's an impulse there.
And Raydar was talking about that when he talked about black culture being de-African Americanized.
Right, and so it's like whether it's conscious, right? Whether you're like, oh, okay, I remember how the Rolling Stones got huge, you know, singing Big Mama Thornton's song. It's just like, or, you know, I'm sorry, Elvis. See, this is my passive aggression. I don't remember a lot of this. I'm like, oh, whatever, Elvis. No, but seriously, I'm like, okay, well, okay, like, you, basically, if you could take race music and then sing it some other way, and then somebody say that it's your song, right? Then is it any wonder that the people who inherited that, who have actually, they're in these areas where they don't have access to, say, the music programs, or they don't have access to things that would speak to their basic needs, the one thing that they're going to be able to hold on to is that cultural continuity. It's like, no, we're here. It's like that sign in the protest, I am a man. That's how I look at just the way of shouting it out.
What
it's
could
like,
be more self-referential than that?
Right. Well, but I feel like it's
it's
just self-referential. I feel like it's a collective self. Is what I'm saying.
Yes.
I just want to say one quick thing. The sign of where we are today. If you go into a classroom of young kids and you ask them about jazz or what they think about it, one, it's old music, and two, it was made by white folks.
Yeah.
It's fact. It's not. I've heard it more than once.
And that's what happened to rap. So.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, not that. I don't want to be confused. Like, you know, I love white folks, brown folks, every folks. It's all good. But there's not one music in the world that comes out of thin air. It comes out of a culture, and that's where that's coming from. And it's not that any certain person can't be included or whatever. You know, there's tons of examples that, you know, Eminem can rap and certain dudes can play drums or whatever. What I'm saying is that it's important to know your history, whether you're talking about Cole Crush or you're talking about Louis Armstrong, the first Michael Jackson. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that he was doing those rhythmic things back in the 20s. You know, he was scatting/rapping back in the 20s. You know, you talk about James Brown, have you heard Louis Armstrong's voice? Have you heard his phrasing? You know? It's easy to let go of these things, but he pretty much set the precedent for what is the pop star, your vocalist. Yeah. He is the first.
Absolutely.
As far as American music. So, I mean, it gets misconstrued, but if you take it all the way back to there and you're teaching all the kids about what's going on, it wouldn't be misconstrued. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about pop, rock, country, you know, it all stems from that culture.
Well said. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Gwen Black, and I am an artist and curator. And I'm so glad I came on the tail end of what you guys were saying. I have been producing visual arts and jazz for a long time. And it's very interesting, as you were saying, Igmar, about the jazz being pushed over and the hip-hop being pushed over. So back in, I think 2002, I created a series called Swing, Bebop to Hip-Hop. And since you brought up Stan Crouch's name, I sort of got a slap on the wrist and said, what does, you know, hip-hop has nothing to do with jazz has nothing to do with, you know, hip-hop or bebop, but it does. It's very important for us to begin to teach the younger generation that it is a timetable of black music. Yeah. And no, culture never dies because the spirit never dies. It's just going to come always in different forms and different ways. So I think what we have to do, this generation, all of us, is important to be the producer, that we get the message out, and that we all come together and collaborate so we can know what you're doing. This is great tonight, but we're on the other side, we're also doing events. So with that being said, I hope this summer that some of you will join me for my Visual Arts and Jazz Fest, which is now celebrating 10 years, with a nice event around swing, bebop, to hip hop. Because these kids are loving jazz. I teach free every Wednesday at Conti Collin. I have them doing a huge mural dedicated to a night into leisure. They are loving it. I'm teaching adults with disabilities about jazz. They're loving it. So there are ways that we can come together and collaborate, and it's very important that we keep this momentum going, because our younger generation, yes, jazz is born in Europe, but we have to keep it here, and we have to educate the community about it.
Just tell them it's music, don't call it jazz. They might get scared.
That's what it's called, it's jazz.
Well,
it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to include everything, like you said, the whole lineage, from hip-hop all the way back, you know? And that's what I think, especially the youngsters, especially my generation, they're more attracted to the music and what sounds good, rather than, you know, what it might sound.
Right, but the more we get it in front of them in creative ways, trust me, and maybe you guys, if you have some time when you're in town, stop by the library and see what we're doing.
Well, perhaps afterwards, you and some of our panelists can talk about ways to collaborate. And we have, how much time left now? So we're going to take 2 more questions. Okay, so let's take one from there and one from there, and make them good and fast, please.
I thought I decided just in time. Peace, my name is Sean. I'm a youth organizer. I work with young people in the Bronx.
Yes, a little louder.
I'm sorry. Peace, my name is Sean. I'm a youth organizer. I work with young people in the Bronx. And sometimes I'm horrified at the music that they're listening to and that they don't know folks like KRS-One. We used to run this session of conversation called Hip Hop and Politics. And at the center of a lot of those conversations was around what that by Freddy opened with, was around the macho, misogynistic culture in hip hop. I think one of the most beautiful things about Tribe was that they came out and was just like regular dudes talking about regular things, and there was authenticity in the music. And now 15, 20 years later, it feels like that space is lacking. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on the cultural shift in the past 15, 20 years, and what has happened to where hip-hop is much more about posturing these days than about real, authentic communication.
Well, you know, listening to this, I think oftentimes a bunch of things going through my head. And essentially, probably the best aspects of the hip-hop that everybody really embraces was this period probably from the mid-late 80s into the late 90s, when you had this very buoyant period of a diverse amount of groups saying a diverse amount of things. And, you know, when we have the time to look back and we realize, oh my God, it was so incredible. I think about jazz in particular, particularly bebop, which was, when I was coming up, my dad was still in that period, which pretty much the most important aspects happened from the late 40s into the late 50s, early 60s. And so things change. That's just a part of how it goes. But I think, you know, in this era, I always tell people, for young kids, all this stuff right now is a few clicks away. So it's a lot easier to access the information. Getting to that point is the objective. But, you know, in previous generations and times, we had to go to libraries, go to bookstores. You know, we had to go through a lot more work to understand the history. It's a lot easier. And so as things do change, and that's a problem, I think the objective is to get kids to click a few things and to see that it's all right there. And I met a lot of younger kids, teenagers, that are curious about these things. Unfortunately, it's hard to get them all moving in lockstep. But there are young kids out there. I see a lot more young kids just being more diverse. You know, skateboarding through the streets of Harlem, which is an indication that they're trying to, you know, not be crack dealer, drug dealer, some of those typical modes of what's been projected to be cool. So I don't have the complete answer, but I know things have changed. But the information is easier to get to.
Now, just add really quickly, don't let the radio and TV raise your children. I mean, because they're always going to sell you the thing that's going to do the best for them and not necessarily the best for you.
And also the misogynistic material and almost this vile rap, it was always there. It was just always a balance. There was more balance going on. Nowadays, it's just that the sex, all this stuff gets promoted way more. And there are artists out there that are more in tune with with, you know, like the Tribe Called Quest aesthetic, whether it's the Kendrick Lamar or most staff that are out there. It's just a question of getting out there and finding it. But they are there.
Our last questioner.
Hello, my name is Brandon Lewis, and we've seen throughout history that many great movements have started on the street, and they have been exemplified by music. Jazz is one of them. I hate using that word to explain that music because it explains something else that's really nasty. But hip-hop is another example of that. Now, when we see these art forms come about, we notice as they gain momentum, they get piggybacked by a certain part of our society that likes to think that it's in control. And I'm not talking about white people. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about a control mechanism using a particular art form to control everyone in society. Black folks, white, Mexican, Asian, everyone. Now, my question is, how could hip-hop, which I think that Tribe Called Quest and other great hip-hop groups was good at this, but I see it waning now. How can hip-hop in these days and times keep its prominence that it had when it came out and help encourage people to learn about their state in life, their surroundings, and how their government works, and how to better take care of themselves and the people around them?
Thank you.
You know, you're touching on a discussion that was had a lot, like in the late 90s and through now. But I think the real issue is not so much how can the music teach people, as much as how can you build community involvement? How can you build?
That's what I'm talking about right there.
Okay, but so what I'm saying is any music is going to amplify the values and it's going to amplify the movement. It's not going to be the movement. And so if we're talking about how to inform young people or how to get them to take care of themselves or how to have analysis around what the government does or how commerce is set up or any one of these things, a music, particularly a consumer product, consumer-driven music is not going to do that for them. It's going to have to be about a demand, and that demand comes, like you said, from the streets and through the organizing. And so that organizing has to be there before hip-hop can do anything.
I want to thank you all for attending tonight, and this has been a really good time. Let's thank our guests, Igmar Thomas, Schloss, Akiba Solomon, Freddy, Igmar Thomas, Raydar Ellis, and Alvin Aqua Blanco. I personally want to thank Simone, Brad, Carrie, and my lovely wife Zakia, who is here tonight. Zakia, just wave, please. And right now, Simone Anderson, thank you.
To all of the panelists. This has been an extraordinary kickoff. This is Movement 1. I ask that all